Hello, my name is Leela K. Forga Power, and I want to talk about how some abusers are created. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, in the United States, roughly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner. I am here to inform you about the psychology of people who harm others physically, emotionally, or sexually, also known broadly as abusers. Nearly everyone has experienced abuse in some way, shape, or form, whether it was one short-lived experience or multiple repetitive instances. Abuse can be anything from having an extremely overly involved parent to having a significant other belittle you to being beaten by your peers in a locker room. Whatever the case may be, your trauma is valid. Personally, I grew up in an abusive home environment. I have experienced domestic violence within my romantic relationships, and I was bullied for 6 consecutive years, which has harmed my mental health, but also grown my knowledge and curiosity about what causes someone to become abusive. While abusers are typically thought of and portrayed as horrible, sadistic individuals, research indicates that abusers suffer from the psychological consequences of their traumatic childhoods and unconscious biases. To understand what causes someone to become abusive, we first have to understand the effects of being abused. Victims of early abuse and neglect tend to struggle to regulate their emotions and are often more sensitive to social cues that appear threatening or angry. Dr. Domina Petrick writes in the April 2022 issue of the Open Journal of Medical Psychology that the most common forms of abusive behaviors are gaslighting, defamation of character, mockery, and bullying. When an individual endures these abusive behaviors, their self-image and mental health are damaged as they begin to develop signs of a mental health condition or crisis such as anxiety, depression, psychosis, low self-esteem, lack of confidence, suicidal ideation, self-harm, broken mirror syndrome, or suicide. Victims of childhood maltreatment tend to suffer from poorer mental and physical health than those who were raised in a safer environment. Dr. Veena Kumari writes in the November 2020 issue of the British Journal of Psychiatry that childhood maltreatment takes the form of physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, and that the definition of abuse varies by culture, while its effects remain the same regardless of severity. In addition to the previously mentioned signs of a mental health condition or crisis, children who have been emotionally abused may later feel hopeless, alone, unsatisfied with life, have altered stress responses, experience brain deficits, or develop personality disorders and psychiatric illnesses such as eating disorders and substance abuse disorders. Now that I have addressed the psychological damage that abuse causes in children, I want to bring attention to the traits that abusers typically possess to show a connection to the mental health issues that abuse causes and arises from. Certain personality traits increase an individual's risk of engaging in physical, emotional, or sexual abuse toward an intimate partner. The Connections for Abused Women and Their Children website includes information about how some emotionally abusive men tend to have low self-esteem, believe that women are inferior to men, feel entitled, are hypersensitive, and have impractical expectations of romantic relationships. As I mentioned before, childhood abuse can breed more abusers who may lack self-esteem, so it's not a surprise that most abusers inflict harm on their individuals, possibly to regain the power and control that they lacked as an abused child. The Safe Shelter of St. Vrain Valley website includes information about how abusers often seek to control their intimate partners in every way, downplay the severity of their abuse, refuse to take responsibility, and have difficulty trusting others. While becoming an abuser may be primarily driven by the mental health, personality, and trauma of the individual, it is also important to understand that their behavior is also cognitive or learned through their family dynamics and home environment. Childhood maltreatment tends to perpetuate the cycle of violence. Dr. Carolyn A. Green and her colleagues write in the August 2020 issue of the Clinical Psychology Review that their studies suggest that parents who experienced childhood maltreatment or witnessed violence were more likely to practice abusive parenting techniques, neglect their children, or engage in violence with their intimate partner. Many abusers were raised in an environment where abuse was accepted and normalized. An October 8, 2014 article by Dr. Jean Kim in Psychology Today suggests that the abuser continues the cycle of violence that they were raised in because they learned from their role model about when and how to abuse to maintain balance and order within the household. On the other hand, the abuser may exhibit sexism in their violence by only abusing those who share the same gender as their original abuser due to their hatred toward that person. Similarly, the abuser may be violent toward others as a defense mechanism for their past trauma because they do not want to ever be a victim of abuse again. Although nobody can justify their abusive behavior due to their past experiences, upbringing, or mental health conditions, learning about why and how people become abusive is important because knowledge and understanding tend to bring about positive change. Ultimately, I discussed how abusive behavior stems from the psychological consequences of trauma, the need for power and control, and learning from negative role models. I urge everyone to educate themselves about what causes abuse, what abuse looks like, and how abusers affect their victims. While there is no excuse for abuse, learning about and bringing awareness to abuse will help us break the cycle of violence in our own lives to lay a healthier foundation for future generations. Thank you.